Over the past 24 hours, President Trump has moved decisively to impose steel and aluminum tariffs on Canada, effective immediately, while granting other United States trading partners a grace period until August 7th. In a brief statement, Trump claimed that Prime Minister Carney called the White House yesterday, though no conversation took place. He later told NBC News he remains open to more discussions. Since the new tariffs were announced, Canadians have responded forcefully, and several United States officials have made equally controversial remarks. We'll begin by reviewing comments from the American perspective before turning to Canadian responses. United States Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick didn't mince words about the rift with Canada over both trade and foreign policy. Reflecting on Ottawa's recent decision to recognize a Palestinian state, he asked, "Imagine the president freaks out that the Canadians put out, 'Oh, we're going to recognize the Palestinian state.' I mean, come on, don't be so tone-deaf, right?" He warned that by inserting itself into Middle East diplomacy, Canada risks alienating a United States administration totally into trying to get peace in Gaza, and yet throwing your hat in the ring from Canada, a move Lutnick clearly found counterproductive. On the tariff front, Lutnick reminded his audience that Canada remains one of only two countries, alongside China, to have retaliated against United States duties. "They still haven't solved dairy," he quipped, before noting that only two countries on the whole world retaliated against the United States of America tariffs: China, which we all know, and Canada. Given that isolation, he just don't see the president stepping off the gas, predicting that a full 35% levy is surely in the cards. He added, however, that a friendly call or a bit of charm from Prime Minister Carney, if he makes that call, and stops the silliness, might encourage the White House to let it down a bit. Senator Bernie Sanders fired back at President Trump's threat to punish Canada with new tariffs over its decision to recognize Palestinian statehood, calling the move absolutely insane. He argued that you don't suddenly raise tariffs because an independent, free country does something you don't like, warning that treating a close ally like Canada as a political cudgel will only drive up costs for United States workers and consumers. Sanders reminded viewers that, under the USMCA, most of the goods exported from Canada to the United States are exempt from tariffs for another 2 years, and cautioned that any future levies need to be thought about very carefully to avoid unintended damage at home. In Ottawa, Premier Doug Ford warned that President Trump's sudden steel and aluminum tariffs are taking direct aim at our economy, and vowed, "I will fight like I've never fought before." He urged Ontario businesses and consumers to buy Canadian when you can, from steel I-beams and aluminum cans to rail cars, so that those 9 million American jobs tied to Ontario manufacturing are protected. Ford stressed that Canada cannot roll over in the face of United States pressure, recalling his directive to Ottawa, "I told the Prime Minister, do not roll over. Hit that guy back as hard as we possibly can." Drawing on Canada's recent experience, Ford noted that Ottawa's retaliatory tariffs had previously forced the United States to back off the worst of its threats, and he encouraged premier-level coordination with federal negotiators to secure credit for Canada's commitments, such as increased defense and border spending, and to explore any landing zone for compromise on steel, aluminum, and autos. With other allies isolated and Trump, making an example of Canada to send a message to the rest of the world, Ford argued that Ontario must become more competitive, more resilient, and more self-reliant, investing in homegrown infrastructure and industry so that the province can withstand any future United States trade actions. Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston has urged Ottawa to push back in some way, proposing measures such as removing American alcohol from store shelves and reviewing procurement rules. "We have to push back for sure," he said, while leaving the details of counter-tariffs to the Prime Minister and his negotiating team. Canada's federal government has emphasized its commitment to securing the best possible agreement on its own terms. As Canada-U.S. Minister Dominic LeBlanc declared, "We're not going to accept any deal because of an arbitrary timeline that the Americans set. We're going to do the work that's necessary to get the best deal for the country." Echoing that resolve at the provincial level, Ontario's representative to Washington, David Patterson, stressed the importance of standing firm. "It's extremely important that we be seen to be standing up for ourselves." The impacts of $1 billion of American alcohol being taken off the shelves of the LCBO underscore why Canada must show it will defend its interests robustly. In a pointed CBC News interview, Peter Dinolo, former communications director to Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, warned that Canada is up against a mafia state in its dealings with the Trump administration. Commenting on Prime Minister Carney's decision to recognize Palestinian statehood just ahead of a looming United States trade deadline, Dinolo insisted he wouldn't read anything into the timing, but noted that Gaza's situation has deteriorated from bad to worse, and that Ottawa's move was in line with other long-standing Canadian positions. Dinolo bristled at the idea that Canada must defer to the White House on its own foreign policy. If he is now squawking that we are making our own foreign policy decisions, Dinolo said of President Trump, and that we shouldn't be doing that if we want a free trade agreement, then that is a clear signal that Canadians should be wide awake in facing what we're dealing with. He drew a sharp contrast with Mexico and European nations. He hasn't said this about Mexico or the European countries, arguing that Trump's selective criticism amounts to intimidation. This is a guy, as Prime Minister Carney said, who wants to break us so we can own us. Well, he's acting like it today. Pressing Carney and his ministers to assert Canada's sovereignty, Dinolo urged Ottawa to treat its sovereign rights like muscle tissue. If you don't exercise them, they atrophy. He recalled Trump's blunt boast that he doesn't want to invade Canada, but he wants to take us over, and warned that the president expects submissive partners. There's no way we should do that, Dinolo declared. The government is doing what it was elected to do, which is stand up for Canadian interests and for Canadian sovereignty. Turning to the trade dispute, Dinolo downplayed fears of lasting damage. He reminded viewers that the USMCA exempts most of the goods exported from Canada to the United States from tariffs, and that any new levies are already being discounted by Canadian business and the markets. As for the possibility of conceding to a baseline United States tariff rate in a future deal, he simply reiterated Carney's campaign pledge: he will only accept a good deal for Canada. Ultimately, Dinolo argued, Canadians don't care what feral urge drives the United States president. They want a government that stands up for Canadian interests. You can disagree with the position the government has taken on the Middle East, he concluded, but you can't disagree with a sovereign government's right to make its own foreign policy decisions. In an interview with CBC News, Brian Clow, who served as Deputy Chief of Staff to Trudeau and once headed the infamous Canada-United States Friendship Room War Room in Washington, observes that in Donald Trump's unpredictable world, deadlines get set, we find ourselves in chaos, and now, he warns, Canada must take its decisions hour by hour. He identifies 3 immediate priorities for Canada: consulting political and business stakeholders, weighing fresh concessions, and assessing whether to deepen retaliatory tariffs, or attempt both simultaneously. Clow emphasizes that Canada is, for the time being, isolated. While Mexico secured a 90-day extension of tariff renegotiations, and the European Union, Japan, and others refrained from striking back, only 2 countries, Canada and China, stood up thus far. This isolation, he argues, is deliberate. Trump is making an example of Canada to send a message to every other country: don't retaliate or else. By targeting Canada with an immediate tariff hike, days before those on other allies take effect, Trump aims to deter Brussels, Tokyo, and Mexico from following Ottawa's lead. Yet Clow stresses that Canada still wields significant leverage. He points to recent Canadian commitments on border infrastructure and a long-promised increase in defense spending, measures the Americans have wanted us to do for a long time, as bargaining chips that ought to earn goodwill in Washington. Reflecting on earlier confrontations during the initial NAFTA negotiations, he recalls that Trudeau's retaliatory tariffs got the United States president to back off the worst of his threats and prevented the exclusion of most Canada-United States trade from Trump's tariffs. Looking ahead, Clow urges Canada's negotiators, Ambassador Kirsten Hillman and Minister Dominic LeBlanc, to press 2 main themes in upcoming talks with United States officials. First, they should insist on credit for concessions already made, from military spending to border security. Second, they should explore any viable landing zone on steel, aluminum, and autos, perhaps a modest further step toward United States demands that Ottawa can live with. Above all, Clow cautions, Carney must balance these tactical compromises against domestic anger at being treated like America's 51st state. Canadians, he observes, are willing to give some space to the Prime Minister to do what's needed, but not too much. In this fragile moment, as Trump signals both openness to dialogue and a willingness to punish dissenters, Ottawa faces a stark choice: stand firm and risk deeper isolation, or seek pragmatic trade-offs to de-escalate a dispute that has already rattled markets and frayed what was once North America's most harmonious bilateral relationship. Thank you for watching. As an independent channel, we don't have corporate backing. We rely on your support to keep going. If you found this video valuable, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps more people find our work. Thank you so much for being part of our community. Check out the next video on your screen. We picked it just for you.